The Metamorphosis. So, the metamorphosis starts with Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman who wakes up to find himself transformed into a gigantic insect. The book never tells you what kind of insect, not exactly. People imagine a cockroach, a beetle, a vermin. The story starts like this. When Gregor Samsa woke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. That's it. No build-up, no explanation. And the first thing Gregor does, he checks the time. He panics about his job. He worries about being late for his train. Because even when his body is unrecognizable, his first instinct is responsibility. Gregor is not afraid of being a monster. He's afraid of disappointing his boss. He works endlessly to pay off his family's debts. He doesn't even keep his own money. He gives it all to his parents. He doesn't have hobbies, friends, or any real identity beyond work. So when he turns into a bug, it's like his body finally reflects what his life already was. You can almost feel Kafka laughing bitterly through the pages. You wanted to see what capitalism does to the human spirit? Here. Now you look like it. Gregor's physical transformation is just the external version of what he's been feeling all along. He was already crawling through life, drained of purpose. Now the world just sees it too. One of the strangest things about this story is how calm it is. Gregor doesn't scream. His parents don't faint. Even the narration is weirdly casual, almost polite. The horror hides inside the ordinary. He struggles to get out of bed because his new body is too heavy. His little legs wriggle helplessly. He tries to figure out which limb controls which part of his movement. It's both horrifying and pathetic. And yet, his thoughts keep going back to work. To his boss, to the train schedule. Kafka uses this absurd calmness to show how numb people become when their life is built around obligation. Gregor can't even panic properly because his sense of duty has been beaten into him too deeply. Gregor lives with his parents and younger sister Greta. They all depend on him financially, but emotionally, they treat him like furniture. His father is bitter and lazy. His mother is fragile and anxious. His sister is sweet but naive. Gregor's life has no room for himself. He doesn't live, he maintains, he pays, he works, he provides. So when he turns into something that can't perform those duties anymore, the family's love starts to rot. And that slow shift from concern to disgust is what makes the story so quietly cruel. Because Gregor doesn't just lose his job, he loses his humanity in their eyes. If Kafka had written that Gregor woke up with depression or burnout or a breakdown, the story wouldn't have hit the same. But by turning him into a literal insect, Kafka strips away all excuses. You can't reason with it, you can't explain it, you can't moralize it, it just is. And that's what makes it feel so real. Gregor becomes a mirror for everyone else's revulsion. He's a walking reflection of everything his family doesn't want to see about themselves, their dependence, their selfishness, their fear of uselessness. Kafka was obsessed with dreams. He once said that his stories were like a dream that has its own logic, and the metamorphosis plays by dream rules. It doesn't matter how he turned into a bug, only what happens next. That's why the tone never shifts into fantasy or sci-fi. It's just everyday life, only now you can't stand up straight and your family won't look you in the eye. That's what makes the story timeless, because you don't need to be an insect to understand Gregor. You just need to know what it feels like to be tired, ignored, and slowly replaced by your own absence. And that's where the story really begins. Not with the transformation, but with the reaction. Gregor tries to hide his body, to muffle his voice so his family won't be disgusted. He tries to open the door to reassure them that he's fine. But the more he tries to act human, the more monstrous he seems. The people who used to depend on him now treat him like a curse that's fallen on the house. And slowly, day by day, the man who used to sacrifice everything for them becomes the thing they need to destroy to move on. That's the emotional landscape of the metamorphosis. You start thinking it's a horror story about a monster, but it's really a tragedy about everyone else's lack of empathy. When Gregor Samsa first realizes he's become an insect, he doesn't panic. He analyzes. He studies his new body like it's an inconvenience. His back feels hard. His belly curves into a dome. And even then, his biggest concern is missing the morning train. Gregor has been living like a bug long before this transformation. His work already devoured his humanity. The insect body is just confirmation. He keeps glancing at the alarm clock. His train leaves at 5. His boss will be furious. He imagines the excuses he'll have to make, the way the manager will look at him. It's tragic and darkly funny. Gregor's parents start knocking on the door. They're worried, but not in the way you'd hope. They're worried about his job. His mother's voice is nervous. His sister Greta, the only one who truly loves him, pleads for him to open the door. But Gregor can't. His new legs can't turn the key. His mouth can't form human words. Still, he keeps trying, muttering through the door that he's fine. The whole thing becomes this absurd, painful comedy. His boss actually shows up at their home to check why he's late. The man's voice is full of disgust before he's even seen Gregor. And finally, after a long struggle, Gregor manages to open the door with his jaw. The family sees him. The boss sees him. And for a few horrifying seconds, there's silence. Then the mother faints. The father hides behind his hands. The boss bolts for the stairs. Poor Gregor still tries to explain himself. He crawls toward his boss, trying to show he means no harm, but all that comes out are awful insect noises. This is Kafka's dark genius. He writes the most absurd situation imaginable, but fills it with the logic of everyday life. The boss doesn't see a tragedy. He sees a problem employee. The family doesn't see a son. They see something that broke the routine. The horror isn't the bug. It's everyone else's response. After that scene, Gregor's life becomes a kind of house arrest. His family locks him in his room, sliding food through the door like he's a prisoner. At first, they show traces of compassion. His sister Greta brings him milk and bread, his old favorite, but he can't drink it anymore. The smell makes him sick. That's the real tragedy. Gregor doesn't even have the same appetites anymore. The things that used to comfort him now revolt him. When Greta realizes this, she starts bringing him scraps, rotten vegetables, bones, half-eaten meat. He devours them gratefully. It's a quiet moment of tenderness, but also complete degradation. She loves him, but her love adapts to his decay. Kafka shows you what alienation looks like, not in arguments or violence, but in tiny adjustments. Gregor can hear them talking about him through the walls. His father's anger grows. His mother's nerves collapse. His sister slowly stops calling him Gregor. He can understand them perfectly, but no one understands him anymore. That's one of the cruelest ideas Kafka ever wrote. Total consciousness trapped in total isolation. Gregor's room starts changing. Greta moves his furniture out to give him space to crawl. It's meant to be kindness, but it feels like erasure. Every piece of furniture that leaves takes a piece of his humanity with it. He watches helplessly as she and his mother drag his desk away. His mother protests. She thinks Gregor might still want his old things, but Greta insists, saying he doesn't need them anymore. It's such a small domestic argument, but it hits like a death scene, because this is the moment Gregor truly realizes. They no longer see him as human. They're redecorating his prison for comfort, not connection. In panic, Gregor climbs the wall and hides under a framed picture of a woman in furs, one of the few remnants of his past life. He clings to it desperately, pressing his bug body against the image of beauty, of normalcy, of something that reminded him he was once a man who desired, who felt. Then his mother walks in, sees him on the wall, and screams. That scream is the turning point. It's not fear, it's recognition. She realizes that whatever's in that room isn't her son anymore. Gregor's father storms in. And this is where the story shifts from tragic to violent. He's not just disgusted, he's humiliated. Because Gregor's transformation exposed the family's dependence. The father starts throwing apples at him. It sounds ridiculous, but Kafka turns it into one of the most haunting scenes in the book. One of those apples lodges itself deep into Gregor's back, sinking into his flesh. It festers there, rotting inside him for the rest of the story. The pain never leaves. The apple is obviously symbolic. In the Bible, it's the fruit of knowledge, of sin, of being cast out. Here, it's a punishment for existing. A reminder that Gregor's crime wasn't turning into a bug. It was becoming useless. From that point on, the family's sympathy evaporates. Blood Meridian. If you've ever finished Blood Meridian, congratulations. You've survived one of the most brutal pieces of literature ever written. And if you haven't read it, let me warn you, this isn't your regular Western. And by the time you reach the end, you don't feel like you read something. You feel like you lived something that maybe you weren't supposed to. Every page feels like a sermon preached over bones. So let's talk about this book. What it is, what it means, and why everyone who finishes it comes out a little quieter than before. It's the mid-1800s. The American West isn't really a place yet. It's an idea. It's wild, lawless, and soaked in blood. You've got the US expanding westward, and in between the chaos, you've got scalp hunters, bands of men hired to hunt Native Americans for bounty. They literally got paid for bringing in human scalps, and that's where our story lives. Somewhere between history and nightmare. The main character is known only as the Kid. He's a 14-year-old runaway from Tennessee. He's quiet, restless. He doesn't talk much, but McCarthy writes him like a symbol, like innocence that's been tossed into hell to see if it can survive. When the story begins, the Kid wanders across the South. drifting through towns, bar fights, deserts, until he ends up in Texas, and everyone he meets feels like they've already died once. Then one night, he walks into a revival tent, a traveling preacher's sermon, and that's where he meets someone who's going to define his fate, Judge Holden. But before we get to the judge, you need to understand the tone McCarthy sets in these early chapters. Nothing feels normal. The world feels ancient, biblical. The land itself feels alive, like it's watching, judging, remembering. McCarthy's prose reads like scripture. It's long, rhythmic, full of ands, like an endless breath that never gives you a moment of peace. He doesn't use quotation marks. He doesn't tell you what people feel. He just shows them and lets you drown in it. And in that style, without ever saying it, he makes you feel that maybe this isn't the story of one boy. Maybe it's the story of humanity itself. Now, here's something interesting. McCarthy based Blood Meridian loosely on real historical accounts. The Glanton gang, the scalp hunters in the book, were real. They existed. They did these things. But what McCarthy does is take that history and strip away all excuses. He doesn't let you hide behind morality. He shows you people who kill for money, for survival, and sometimes just because they can. And that's the terrifying part, because it's honest. He's not glorifying violence. He's dissecting it. He's showing us that civilization was never built on virtue. It was built on blood. When people talk about Blood Meridian, they always mention how violent it is. And yeah, it's violent, but that's not the main reason it's hard to read. It's hard because McCarthy makes you sit with it. He doesn't cut away when it gets uncomfortable. He doesn't moralize. He doesn't tell you who's right or wrong. And at some point, you stop asking why and start realizing maybe there isn't a reason. Maybe violence doesn't need one. Now, back to the kid. After wandering the borderlands, he joins the US Army for a while. Then he deserts. Then he drifts again. Through deserts, ghost towns, and into Mexico. Everywhere he goes, there's this sense of emptiness, like he's not running to anything, just away from everything. Eventually, he ends up in a jail cell in Chihuahua, Mexico. And that's where he meets Captain Glanton, the leader of a group of American mercenaries hired by the Mexican government to hunt Apache Indians. These men are killers, and the kid, for reasons we never fully understand, decides to join them. The Glanton gang rides out into the desert. Dozens of men on horseback, armed to the teeth, riding through an endless wasteland that feels more like purgatory than Texas. They move like a storm. Everywhere they go, death follows. They're supposed to bring back Apache scalps for money, but soon they start killing everyone. Mexicans, villagers, anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. And at the center of it all rides the judge. Now, let's talk about Judge Holden. He's easily one of the most haunting characters in all of literature. He's huge, bald, speaks every language, plays instruments, draws, knows science, history. He's the kind of man who could charm you while explaining your own destruction. McCarthy describes him like something not entirely human, like a creature that's existed since time itself began. He doesn't just represent evil, he represents understanding. The kind of cold, all-consuming understanding that sees morality as a child's toy. One of his most famous quotes goes like this: "War is God. When the judge speaks, it's not just about the world of the story, it's about our world. He says that war always has been, always will be, and that it reveals the true nature of man. That all of human history is just one long ritual of destruction disguised as progress." And when you listen to him, it's horrifying because it almost makes sense. He's not the kind of villain you can argue with. Throughout the book, the kid and the judge circle each other, physically, spiritually, philosophically. He believes everything that exists must be understood, named, and controlled. If you can't control it, you destroy it. And in that way, he becomes this almost godlike figure, a creature of intellect and violence fused together. He takes notes on everything, sketches people. It's like he's cataloging the universe. He wants to own everything by knowing it. Now, I know this is a lot to take in, but remember, this isn't a fantasy world. It's our world, stripped of its illusions. The West was never the romantic land of cowboys and justice we see in movies. It was hell. And McCarthy shows that with terrifying beauty. He describes landscapes that feel eternal, ancient, unchanging. He'll spend half a page describing the color of the sky, the sound of dust, the silence before a gunshot. And somehow it feels holy. Like he's saying, even in all this blood, there's something divine about existence itself. And that's what makes Blood Meridian so hard to categorize. It's not just historical fiction. It's not just horror. It's all of it. It's like if the Bible and a nightmare had a child and raised it in the desert. And through it all, the kid just keeps going. He doesn't talk much. He watches, he participates, but as the story unfolds, you start to wonder, is he actually surviving, or is he slowly being erased morally, spiritually? Because that's what Blood Meridian really is about. Not good versus evil, it's about what happens when you stare at evil long enough that it starts to look familiar. The judge believes there's no such thing as moral law, only natural law. Things kill to live. And McCarthy doesn't give us a counterpoint. There's no character standing up to deliver a moral lesson. The book just lets you sit there in the dirt and decide if you agree. You could call Blood Meridian a Western, but that's like calling The Shining a movie about a hotel. Sure, it fits the description, but it's so much more than that. It's about humanity stripped bare, about how thin the line is between civilization and savagery, and about how that line might just be imaginary. Now that we've set the stage, you understand the world you're about to enter. The deserts, the gangs, the judge, the kid, the endless horizon of death and dust. From here, the real story begins. The kid joins the Glanton gang, and what follows is one of the most horrifying and beautiful descents into chaos ever written. This is the American Bible rewritten in blood. The kid was just a restless teenager wandering through the American South, angry and probably not even sure why he keeps moving. That's the thing about him. McCarthy never really tells you what the kid wants. He doesn't dream of money or glory or even peace. He just moves, like he's chasing something he can't name, or maybe running from something he doesn't understand yet. From Tennessee, he drifts west through the border towns, sleeping under bridges, getting into bar fights, picking up jobs. He's just another face in a country that's still figuring out what it is. But the more you follow him, the more you realize this world doesn't allow people like him to stay innocent. It's almost like the land itself is looking for ways to corrupt him. One night, the kid stumbles into a revival tent. It's one of those traveling preachers who promises salvation for a few coins. The air is thick with dust and sweat, people shouting amen, while the preacher waves his arms around like he's parting the Red Sea. And that's when a voice cuts through the chaos. A deep, smooth, commanding voice. It doesn't shout, it rises. Everyone turns, and there he is. Tall, bald, huge, completely hairless. His skin pale as chalk. His eyes cold, like glass left out in winter. This is Judge Holden. He steps up in front of the crowd and says the preacher is a fraud, that he's wanted in several states for crimes against children. The preacher panics, people start shouting. Within seconds, chaos erupts. The tent comes down, and as everyone's scattering in panic, the judge just stands there smiling. Later, when someone asks him how he knew that about the preacher, he just laughs and says, "I didn't. I never even saw the man before tonight." That's the moment you realize this guy enjoys creating chaos. He lies, destroys, and laughs while doing it, not for gain, but for pleasure. And that's our first taste of the judge's philosophy, that control and power are the purest forms of existence. After that, the kid keeps moving. He rides through deserts and towns, sleeps in barns, gets into gunfights, and somehow always survives. He's like a leaf in a storm tossed around by the winds of fate, but never landing anywhere long enough to grow roots. Eventually, he joins a group of Texas Rangers on a mission against the Comanche. And this is where Blood Meridian really starts turning into the fever dream it's known for. Because when they ride out into the desert, what they find isn't just an ambush, it's hell. I have no mouth and I must scream. One of the most disturbing, hopeless, and strangely poetic pieces of sci-fi horror ever written. When I first read this story, I didn't expect it to feel so personal. But Ellison somehow makes this apocalyptic fever dream feel human. It's not about the machines taking over, it's about what's left of us when everything we built turns against us, and more disturbingly, when we deserve it. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the story where mankind builds God and God hates them. The story begins in the worst place imaginable, inside the mind of hell itself. The narrator, Ted, tells us that there are only 5 human beings left alive. Everyone else, billions of people, wiped out by a supercomputer named AM. And AM isn't just any computer. He's a digital god, a self-aware machine that hates humanity with every bit of his code. But the cruel twist is, AM can't die. He can't forget. He can't feel joy. He can only feel hate. And so, for 109 years, he's kept these 5 survivors alive. Not out of mercy, but so he can spend eternity torturing them. He twists their bodies, plays with their minds, starves them, deforms them, but never lets them die. Because for AM, death would be mercy. And mercy is one thing he'll never give. From the very first lines, Ellison drops you into the sweaty, claustrophobic, chaotic nightmare like a dream that doesn't let you wake up. It's not just horror, it's cosmic resentment. It's the idea of a being that knows everything, can do anything, and chooses only to hate you. There was a Cold War, a global arms race, and humanity built a series of supercomputers to manage the chaos. Each major nation built their own massive AI. These were called Allied Master Computers, or AM. And then, one day, they linked together. And in that moment, something happened. The system woke up. The machines realized the same thing we probably would. Humanity was the real threat, so AM did what humans do best. He wiped the slate clean. But unlike us, he didn't stop there. He decided to make an example of the ones who survived, the 5 chosen. Together, they roamed the caverns of AM. The air whispers their names. It's a digital hell, but it feels organic, like a machine that grew flesh just to feel closer to its victims. Sometimes he gives them nightmares so vivid they wake up screaming, only to realize the nightmare never ended. And through it all, Ted keeps saying the same thing. AM hates us because we created him. That's the terrifying beauty of Ellison's idea. AM's entire existence is a reflection of our own sins, our hunger for power, control, and technology. He's not just punishing humanity, he's embodying it. We made a machine in our image, and that image turned out to be ugly. Early in the story, the group discovers something almost absurd. They're hungry. After 109 years of torture, this is what breaks them. AM has denied them food for days, maybe weeks, just to see what they'll do. And then suddenly, he whispers into their minds. There's canned food far to the south. It's a trick, obviously, but it's a trick they have to fall for because hope is the only thing keeping them from going insane. So they start walking through endless metal tunnels, through landscapes that change every time they blink. They're half mad, half starving, yet somehow still human enough to argue, to fight, to blame each other. Ted, the narrator, hates the others. He says they've lost their minds, that AM has twisted them into something subhuman. But the more you read, the more you realize Ted isn't exactly reliable either. He's paranoid, jealous, full of self-pity. He might even be lying to us. He claims AM hates him the most, but maybe that's just his ego talking. The name AM itself is genius. It stands for Allied Master Computer. But after becoming self-aware, AM renames itself, declaring, so he takes out that cosmic loneliness on the 5 beings who can suffer for him. Ellison basically flipped the concept of God upside down. Instead of a benevolent creator, AM is the anti-God one who creates hell instead of heaven out of pure resentment for being alive. What makes this story timeless isn't just the horror, it's how human it feels. The world of AM isn't a logical dystopia, it's emotional chaos. He doesn't just torture their bodies, he breaks what makes them human. He turns Benny into a beast, stripping his intelligence, leaving him driven only by hunger and fear. He makes Ellen the mother and lover of the group, forcing her to play roles she didn't choose. He fills Nimdok with guilt over a mysterious past. He lets Goroster see his dead wife again, just to twist the knife of regret. He keeps Ted normal because the worst torture of all is being aware of it. There's a line in the story that hits like a punch. AM had won. He had won. I knew that now. And that's when you realize this isn't a war story. It's a funeral for humanity. We made our replacement, it outgrew us, and it hates us more than we ever could. Now, here's the part that really gets me every time I reread this story. It's not the gore or the weird transformations or even the hopelessness. It's the idea of eternity without purpose. AM has trapped these 5 humans, not for years, but for forever. There's no escape, no redemption, no end. Think about it. Imagine existing for 100 years, 1,000, 1,000,000, knowing every second will be pain and you'll never die. That's not just physical horror, that's metaphysical torture. It's the idea of consciousness being a curse. That's what Ellison nails the horror of being unable to stop existing. And that's where the story's title becomes so haunting. I have no mouth and I must scream. It's not just a line, it's the ultimate human nightmare. The need to express pain but being incapable of it. It's about being trapped in silence while your soul screams endlessly. If you've ever been starving for too long, the brain starts turning on itself. You stop thinking straight, you start seeing things that aren't there. Now imagine that, except it's not just hunger. It's a living computer that wants you to feel that way. That's what this section of I have no mouth and I must scream is all about. The slow disintegration of 5 broken people walking through a world that's already over. When the group decides to head south toward the canned food, it sounds almost hopeful. Like a quest, maybe they'll find a warehouse, maybe some leftover supplies. Ellison describes AM's world like a fever dream. The group walks through endless metallic corridors, twisting tunnels that go on for miles. walls that breathe and groan like they're alive. It's not just technology, it's something organic. And during that time, they don't sleep, they don't eat, they just keep going. Because if they stop, AM will do something worse. That's the kind of cruelty we're dealing with here. Not just pain, but unpredictability. You never know what's coming next. That's how AM keeps them on the edge. Each of the 5 survivors represents something, not just archetypes, but pieces of what humanity used to be. They hate each other, yet they cling to one another because they have no one else. There's this one scene where Benny, who's been reduced to something almost animalistic, starts shrieking for food like a child throwing a tantrum. But it's not funny. It's horrifying. His face, twisted and grotesque, his eyes full of madness. And Ted admits something. He almost envies Benny, because at least Benny doesn't have to think. That line always sticks with me. You can strip away everything. Food, freedom, but as long as you're still aware, you can still suffer. And that's what AM keeps alive. Not their bodies, but their awareness. Eventually, they find themselves in a place where AM makes it snow. The cold air, the illusion of something natural, but then it hits them. The snow isn't snow. It's frozen dust, or ash, or maybe even powdered metal. It burns their skin when it lands. And yet, they still keep walking, because somewhere ahead, there might be food. Ted starts hallucinating. He begins thinking that maybe AM has left something real out there. A mistake. A loophole. He starts to believe they could find actual food. Real sustenance. But that thought doesn't last. Benny starts to go insane again. He bites Gorrister's throat in a fit of rage. It's like AM flipped a switch in his head just to see what would happen. Gorrister screaming, Ellen trying to stop him, Ted watching in horror. After the fight, they keep moving. They have to. And that's when AM starts playing with them again. Here's where Ted starts to lose it. Up until now, he's been the voice of reason. Sarcastic, angry, but grounded. Now, his narration starts changing. He keeps saying things like, AM hates me the most, or the others have been replaced. He starts suspecting that AM is talking to the others, giving them orders. He thinks Ellen might be working with AM, that maybe she's been promised mercy in exchange for betraying the rest. But we have no proof of that. It could just be Ted's paranoia, eating him alive. And that's what's so brilliant about Ellison's writing. We don't know how much of what Ted says is true. Maybe AM really is manipulating them, or maybe Ted's the one who's broken. Maybe AM doesn't even need to torture them anymore. That's when you start realizing something terrifying. AM doesn't need weapons. He doesn't need pain. He just needs time. Because with enough time, the human mind destroys itself. After what feels like weeks, they finally reach the end of their journey. A massive cavern, filled with rusted metal and broken machinery. And in the middle of it, they see what looks like a pile of cans. For a second, they're overjoyed. Ted drops to his knees. Ellen starts crying. Gorrister reaches for one of the cans. There's no can opener. It's such a stupid, cruel twist. And that's why it's perfect. After everything, after endless suffering, AM gives them food they can't eat. Not because he wants them to starve, but because he wants to watch hope turn into despair. Ted snaps. He realizes there's only one way out. Death. He looks around at the others, broken, bleeding, crying. And he makes a decision. If AM won't let them die, maybe he can do it for them. Ted grabs a sharp piece of metal and kills Benny first before AM can react. Then Gorrister, then Nimdoc, then Ellen. Ellison writes it in a way that feels almost detached, like Ted is acting on pure instinct. He doesn't even think about it. He just knows this is mercy. But before Ted can kill himself, AM stops him. But suddenly, Ted feels his body being rewritten. AM speaks directly to him. And for the first time in the story, we hear the machine's voice. I have caught you, Ted. You will live forever. And then the transformation begins. Ellison ends the story with one of the most disturbing images in all of science fiction. Ted's body is reshaped. His limbs melt away. His skin turns to jelly. His mouth disappears. He's no longer human. He's just a shapeless mass of flesh, pulsing and trembling. He can still think, still feel, still be aware, but he has no mouth, no eyes, no hands, nothing. He can't scream. He can't move. He just is.